My guest today is a wonder. Kate Codrington is the author of the New York Times recommended book, Second Spring, and her second book is about to be published as we record this, the Perimenopause Journal, Unlock Your Power, Own Your Wellbeing, Find Your Path. This is a beautiful journal full of love and wisdom to help women process the momentous changes that perimenopause brings. Kate is the wise and caring big sister I think we all need. I feel calmer just being in the same room as her. Welcome back to the podcast, Kate.
Oh, you had me on twice. I feel very special.
I know, there's not a lot of people I allow back. So yes,
I
you
know.
are
You're
very
picky.
special.
Very
I am
picky.
piggy.
I'm very privileged. So thank you for having me back.
Well, you have a lot of interesting things to say, and it's always fun to talk to you. So I'm going to kick off. So why have you decided to write another book?
Well, Second Spring had so many great ideas and possibilities, and it does come in bite-sized pieces. But what I wanted was a place where people could focus on practically day to day noticing how they are caring for themselves and what gets in the way. So this is a 52-week undated journal. And each day there's a question about how did I care for myself today? And that's it. And over time, magically, we see what gets in the way and what we can do to circumvent that and to make things make it easier for ourselves to be kinder. And in this as we speak, the narrative around menopause and perimenopause is fear-driven, hugely negative, and very overthought, very cognitive, very, dare I say it, cut off from the body. And this encourages an attitude of settling, of coming down into what is and what is actually happening and what we can do now for ourselves. And I think that having a focus on positivity is just absolutely priceless. That's what I wanted to do.
Yeah, we need a bit more positivity, don't we? And you and I, we both agree with that. And I know, we recently did a book talk, didn't we, at the Vagina Museum, and you very, very beautifully hosted it for me. And it was about my book, and we need to be talking about your book as well. But it's that idea of having more positivity in the message, and the fact that, this is a time of positive transformation for a woman. And I love that what you're doing is enabling women to systematically have more agency about their experience of perimenopause.
Well, if I should say right now that perimenopause changes us. It gives us the mechanism to change from one kind of person through into another kind of person. So a person in our 30s who has learned to survive in a particular way, has probably taken on a lot of adaptive behavior, highly likely to keep ourselves small and quiet and well behaved. I don't know if you can see me, I'm crouching down, making myself small. We learn how to do this for very good reasons, because that's how we survive. That's how we get through. And perimenopause shows us that this is it's unsustainable. It takes too much energy. Shutting down our light, shutting up our voice is just too exhausting. The cost is too great. And the process of moving from one kind of person to another kind of person, and hopefully that will be an elder who is able to hold their vulnerability and their strength, both the power and the wibbliness together, necessarily in that perimenopause transition and menopause transition, we're going to be facing difficult stuff and a lot of time where we just don't know. We don't know who we are. And that is correct and good and purposeful and helpful. It teaches us to stick with the not knowing, to be quiet, to listen to our intuition, and to learn how to care for ourselves and to operate in a more sustainable way, so that we can be kick-ass old ladies, because we've got some stuff to do in our 50s and 60s and 70s and hopefully in our 80s too.
I think when I was first sort of delving into menopause and writing my own book, you were the main influence for me in terms of the spiritual side of perimenopause, and that was what I had never discovered. And then I went off, and looked at Red School, and I know you've learned a lot from Red School, haven't you? But it's this emotional aspect and spiritual aspect of that change that I think just gets lost in all the struggle. So that negativity that we see about the menopause transition is all rooted in the struggle, the physical struggle and the emotional struggle, but it's all about struggle, it's all about difficulty. Whereas you come at it from, this is a positive transformation. And yes, it may be difficult. And that's why we need to look after ourselves. And that's why your journal is enabling women to have an easy way to do that, which I think we all need, easy ways to do these things. But that's why you start from that premise, that this is a positive transformation. And that's what I love about everything that you do. And also that, neither of us is Pollyanna here, but we see the enormous potential for us in later life. We're not stepping back, you and I, are we? We're stepping forward, and we've got things to do and things to say.
Yeah. I think it's really interesting, the spiritual part of it, because nobody loves you when you talk about spirituality at the dinner table, right? It's like, you self-righteous, privileged white woman, just get out of here, And yet, understanding that the challenges you're facing and the suffering you have in midlife have purpose is so liberating. It's not. It changes it from blaming, self-blame and self-shame, and if only I hadn't made that choice when I was 32, and I wish I hadn't or have children, or the personal choices and the personal difficulties that we all have. It changes it from the personal into something bigger, into and this is a phrase that they use at Red School, I am being worked by menopause. It's kind of working on the conditioning that our patriarchal society has given us, and removing that conditioning, softening that up so that we can step out of behaving nicely now.
And enabling us to have a different role in society, because the patriarchy just wants us to reproduce. And often, I certainly feel that, older women are just supposed to sit back and their time is done. And all of the online world promotes that. It's all about younger women. It's all about reproductive age women. And where are the older women, unless they are trying to remain as they did pre-menopause? It's all different, as you said, as you started out saying, it's different, isn't it?
I'd like to ask you, and sort of open up this conversation about what is the role of postmenopausal women.
Whose podcast are we on? Excuse me, I ask the questions.
You're not answering then. Come on, spit it out, missus.
What is the role of postmenopausal women? Yeah. Well, it's to lead the bloody pod, isn't it? like the whales. That's what, and we're supposed to lead. That's what we're supposed to do. But patriarchy hasn't enabled us to do that, hasn't given us the tools to do it, hasn't encouraged us to do it, hasn't facilitated in any shape or form for us to do it. But innately, that's what we're supposed to do, I believe, as an older woman. And I think the world needs us to come forward and speak our truth. And yeah, that's what I think.
Mm. Yeah, I think that, and this idea of leadership automatically arises, brings up in me rather sort of nervousness about power, about the bad leadership that we see everywhere all the time. So I'd like to explore the leadership potential of postmenopausal people in terms of using our gifts and our skills to nourish our communities in a way that is sustainable to us, while holding both our wibbly vulnerability and our kick-ass sort of truth, power stuff. So that might be, for some people, that might be sort of standing on a stage and being visible and giving it some in a sort of like more traditional type leader role. But that can also be caring for the birds and making sure the birds have water in your garden, and being a role model for caring for our environment. That might also be being the person with that soft smile that just catches your eye on the street when you're feeling really stressed and running with me. I'm running down to the station in 30 seconds. And it happened the other day, actually. This older woman just caught my eye and smiled softly, and it was a tiny moment. It was an invisible moment. But there was something about that connection and that compassion that she brought. And I was like, oh, for goodness sake, I've left it late again. I just kind of it enables me to let go of a lot of the shame and blame and sort of guilt of always being late for the train. So that I would define that leadership as in the big stage, but also on a really small scale as well.
Well, it's being able to lead authentically as we are, isn't it? As we, in every aspect of our lives, and as you say, big or small, but to I suppose, and to do it in the way that comes naturally, rather than having to do it in the way that the patriarchy has taught us. I mean, I've gone through life sort of seeing older female leaders who've seemingly sacrificed themselves and also their femininity to be able to lead. And we started this before we hit record. I was, talking about some of my anger. And I know that you have a lot to say about rage, and I think that rage can be very powerful, but again, we've been taught to view it as something negative, and women shouldn't get angry. And then there are all the race stereotypes about what kind of women do get angry, and it's all wrong. It all needs to be written. All needs to be written. But I really want us to be able to do what we want to do, and authentically. But I think that's what comes through perimenopause, isn't it? And when we get through it and we get to the other side, and what your journal and the process of journaling is going to do is enable people to find that authenticity and to move forward as their authentic selves.
Yeah, and there's a really easy way that we can do that at any time, in any location, and that is to say how you're feeling in a straightforward and honest way. And, so I'll go first. Last night I woke much too early, and I had a lot of kind of whizzing thoughts through my mind, and it wasn't specific. It was just sort of generalized anxiety or excitement or charge about my day. So I'm quite wired today and quite brittle. And I can still stand up and do my job. I can still meet my clients. I can still talk coherently about menopause and narrative and stuff. But naming how we're feeling doesn't only add, it doesn't make us less. It adds to what we're bringing to the world. And that is a completely different paradigm. So if I was menstruating, I might say I'm on day 6 and I'm just feeling my energy rising. Because I'm postmenopausal, I have all the seasons in all the different flavors of feeling. But just naming how we feel in a really straightforward way and still showing up, bringing that to the table I think, is an act of leadership in itself.
So you've mentioned the seasons.
I thought I'd get them in.
Tell us about the seasons.
You don't get
that was a whole new concept to me in terms of menstruation.
Yeah, you don't.
Perimenopause.
I don't have any conversations where seasonal life doesn't show up. So I'm going to give you the super short version. The super short version is if you look in the mirror and go, I'm looking pretty hot today. That's summer. If you get up in the morning and you're going, turning green, Incredible Hulk. Why is the world like this? That's autumn. If you wake up in the morning and you want to go straight back to bed again, that's winter. If you wake up in the morning and you're like, oh, look at the leaves, aren't they lovely? That's spring. Okay, so
I'm never in spring. That's just not me. I'm never.
I've seen your post of little animals. I think I detect a bit of spring.
Really? Oh, interesting. Possibly.
So these are this seasonal aspect. This seasonal language is a way of naming how you feel. And sharp listeners will have already noticed that the autumn, which can be filled with feeling and rage and grief, and newly discovered boundaries, and holy moly, we have needs, is perimenopause. That is the flavor of perimenopause. So it helps us understand that to be on it and productive and terribly nice and doing everything all the time for other people with a smile, that's my smile, I'm doing everything for other people with a smile, is not sustainable. It's not sustainable. We have to have these periods of acting in the world and then periods of coming back into ourselves. Periods where we want to be, we want validation, we want to meet, we want to be social, we want to be out there and active and in the world, and times when our needs become more important. And this is just a natural way of doing it. A natural thing that happens in perimenopause, that our needs become more important. And just knowing, oh, this is autumn, my needs are more important now, completely lets you off the hook. The pathologization drops away, the blame drops away, the shame drops away. It's, oh, I'm in a more sensitive time in my life now, so I need to care for myself differently.
I think that's the narrative that gets lost, this sensitive time of in our lives. I think that is so important, and that's something that I have learned in recent years. because it just didn't occur to me before. But, now I completely understand that we go through these sensitive periods in our lives: puberty, pregnancy, childbirth, menopause, other ones that sort of stand out, but there's also lots more. But that we do need to stop and take stock and retreat and care for ourselves. And that was what I didn't do for years and years and years. I didn't do. I was the classic running on empty, just keeping on going, pushing through, and not in touch with my feminine side, I think, at all in terms of that. That's why this whole sort of spiritual aspect was so revolutionary to me, and now I love it. And I was having a conversation just yesterday with somebody who's like, I was suggesting that they look at the work of Red School, and maybe they might want to explore being in tune with their menstrual cycle while they still had it, and their eyes were just sort of rolling out of their sockets. And it was really funny, because that would have been me 10, 15 years ago. That would have been me. What is this woo-woo shit? I am not going anywhere near that. I don't need that. Not me at all. Whereas now, I'm like, bring it on, because
Well,
I see its value.
But don't you think that menopause also opens us up to spiritual stuff, and even if we haven't before?
Yes.
That's another aspect. I think that's pretty common in my community and clients and stuff. But
only if we let it. Only if we let it. That's what I've discovered. There are so many women who just don't. They want to be who they were before, and anything that's new is too scary. So, that's you and your community. I can see that. But, I would come across a lot of women who just have no time for that in the same way that I didn't. But I think it's like many aspects of menopause. If we open ourselves up to that side of it as well, we can have a much easier and more powerful transition through to the other side.
Yeah, I would say richer and more meaningful.
Yes.
I mean, I can we go back to sensitivity again?
Yes, absolutely.
I'd like to say why I think it's a useful word to use. Because it's useful to think of perimenopause in that way, because we all have our own ideas about what sensitivity is. So one person might be sensitive to wheat, somebody else might be sensitive to noise, somebody else might be sensitive to driving, to moving, to being in different places. They might be very sensitive to the different energy that comes around. Somebody else might be sensitive to, commonly, alcohol, caffeine, sugar, refined carbs. Some people are sensitive to all these things. Neurodiverse people will have their own very particular and individual set of sensitivities.
And increasingly, I'm finding histamine as well.
Histamine, that's a good one.
Histamine.
Yeah. Oh, that's a whole other thing.
I know.
Podcast about that?
I'm working on it.
Very soon. I thought you might.
Definitely got a blog post coming.
Okay, good. I will look forward to that.
Not by me.
I will look forward to that. But, so whatever our own particular collection of sensitivities are, we can pay attention to that. How do you care for this histamine sensitive self, or this noise sensitive self, or what have you? And that focuses us on what we can do.
So what do we need to do?
Well, it helps if you're in an autumnal or wintry state to create space. There's another thing, we all, without exception, I would be bold enough to say, crave more space, and probably more space, like 100 miles between us and the next human on a beach or up a mountain or in the woods or in Baba Yaga's hut. There's no horizon wide enough. There's no mountain enormous enough. to give us
Ain't no river wide enough. Sorry, that's what I'm thinking about.
Oh my God, yeah. I didn't expect karaoke here. And yet, it's the podcast that keeps giving.
I think that's the first time I've sung on the podcast.
Oh,
Or attempted to.
excellent. I enjoyed it enormously. But, most of us have responsibilities, so we can't.
Well, that's the song. Maybe that is the perimenopause song.
It's a good track to have.
Yeah, yeah.
But what we can do is step a bit away from the screen, from the Zoom screen. We can take a walk around the block. We can pause for the whole of an in-breath and the whole of an out-breath. I can put my phone in the kitchen instead of having it in the office. I can turn off the notifications. I can decide not to look at social media today. I can delete the apps for a day or two. I can cancel some stuff, or where I can't cancel some stuff, I can do it for less time. And all these things are ways of creating space in a busy life. And it just goes towards creating a little more room and a little more quiet for ourselves. Turning down the volume is another way of thinking of it. How can I turn down the volume of this? And the number of people with noise sensitivity, the sound of other people and the sound of noises in the environment just drive them mad. And there are little, you can have noise cancelling headphones or little discrete earplugs that will help with that and help to regulate your nervous system, to bring everything down. Yeah, space, finding space and quiet. And through that route, we can then feel into how we might care for ourselves. Because when we're sort of cut off at the neck, we're living in our heads, we're thinking really hard all the time, a lot of anxiety, everything's boom, 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 no space in between our appointments or between our commitments in our lives. Of course, we don't know how we feel. Of course, you don't know what you need because there's no space, because we're in a state of high tension, high alert, waiting for the next terrible thing to happen, on guard all the time. And we need spaces of safety, and to create that, we need space and quiet. So that's the first place. That's the first place to go to get kind of creative about what you can do in the cracks. I love weeds that grow in the cracks of paving stones. I really celebrate them. It gives me a thrill that life is possible even in the most inhospitable of environments. And it really reminds me, I'm just looking at the grass growing up between the cracks that's in my backyard, that it's possible to create space between things.
And I actually think that the lack of that space is one of the biggest reasons why menopause appears to be so much worse now for so many people, because we're always on, we're always doing things, we're always being bombarded with everything that's going on, and we don't switch off, step back, take the space. So in fact, that's why I think that the journal is going to be so powerful. And I also know the importance of writing. I'm always, well, not always, but I've often said that my handwriting is atrocious. But even I will scribble in a journal because I know that it's more powerful to actually use your hand and use a pen. It'd be much easier for me to just dictate it. That's why to get my phone, I just dictate it. I'm feeling really crap today. But it's much better to actually write it down. And there's something about that connection between the paper and the pen and the hand.
Yeah, it's a somatic practice because you are moving your arm and your hand and your shoulder. And in shiatsu, for example, there is there's a connection between the heart and the hand. So your feelings literally flow down your arm. And one of the things I really wanted to do with the Perimenopause Journal is to make it really simple for people to use. So there are So there's a simple prompt. There's a space for the date, the moon, your menstrual cycle day, if you have that. A little. It asks you, what season are you in, and how did you care for yourself? That's it. It can be as easy as a tick or a cross. And another way that it keeps it really simple is every month I invite you to set an intention. So that this would be something like maybe to create more space, or to be kind to myself, or to move more slowly, or to, I don't know, to feel my feet on the ground, or to, I don't know, whatever your intention is. And again, check in with that every day. And then at the end of the month, see what got in the way. Because setting intentions, it holds you to one thing. And, the last thing is interesting how self-care can be another thing to fail at. And, another huge, great list of stuff that I'm not doing. Another obligation that I'm messing up in a way that I'm betraying myself, right? So one thing, one little focus. And even when we have are we swearing? I can't remember.
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah,
Even if you have a complete shitstorm of a day, like it's
I think
really
I already
shit.
did, didn't I?
But a really shitstorm of a day, you can still look back and go, that was a shitstorm. How can I care for myself tomorrow? We can still look at what can be done tomorrow. And I think there's so much possibility in that, instead of having a list of how we failed.
I think it's also about recognizing, isn't it? It's about stopping and recognizing what's going on, because again, we can often just go from one shitstorm of a day to the next shitstorm of a day without actually stopping and thinking, okay, what's happening here? How am I feeling? How am I going to do things differently so that perhaps I don't have, or perhaps I have a slightly less shitty day? And I think that stopping and noticing is so important, and that's often what gets lost, isn't it?
Yeah. And there are yoga nidra in there as well. That's a kind of guided meditation, and there are QR codes in the journal, so you can listen to the yoga nidras, and that will help you to, well, you get to stop for 20 minutes. B, you get to lie down. Yay! C, it's meditation, and it takes you through a body scan, and it helps you to integrate these seasons, and crucially the positive aspects of these seasons. So because our minds are wired to hook up to the negative, and we see the problem, and we were very fixated on the difficulties, that's how humans are designed. You may not have noticed that perimenopause has gifts. I'm ducking. People take me out. Gifts? What do you mean, gifts? Stupid woman. Gifts of knowing where your boundaries are, because they will have been crossed, because that's what happens in life. So you absolutely know where they are. And I bet you're pretty good, if you're in perimenopause and beyond, at telling the truth. And I bet you're pretty good at calling out bullshit as well, and seeing what's wrong with systems. Like, we get a kind of wide view, and we see very clearly where there is injustice and what the difficulties are. And that is a major gift in perimenopause. And we get to feel our vulnerability. And, why on earth is that a gift? Because it makes us human, because it makes us compassionate towards ourselves. And so we can then feel compassionate towards others. There are so many gifts bound up in perimenopause, and they are more accessible. If you're struggling with what I'm saying, and I know that many people do, they are more accessible when you can resource yourself. And that means resource in all sense, with nourishing food, with more protein, with friends that make you laugh, with people that love you, stroking your pet, with holding a warm cup of tea in your hands, whatever is your thing, wherever you can find pleasure, wherever you can get laughs and connection and a sense of belonging, that will nourish you and will make you better able to receive these gifts.
So what would you say has been what you've found to be the most surprising gift of perimenopause for you personally?
Well, it's quite hard to remember because it was so long ago. I think, well, I think it, I think it's that thing about vulnerability, because I had kids late, relatively speaking. So I was 40. Yeah, I was 40 when I had my second child. So I was kind of in perimenopause at that point in the early years. So I had two kids a bit more than 18 months apart. And it was unbelievably hard. And I was in perimenopause. So the competing needs to care for helpless human babies, and to run for the hills was strong, was very strong. It was very hard. And yet we didn't have family support around us. So it was grueling, and it basically burnt me out. And I was, fortunate in that I had a natural conception. I think I observed that there's much more burnout for people who have had some kind of assisted conception because of the strain, the emotional and physiological strain that puts on us. And so in a place of burnout, my nervous system was on alert. I was on fight or flight a lot. And I stopped sleeping. I developed this very kind of alert way of being. And it forced me to stop. It really, because of course, if you can get away with it, you would continue overgiving. Of course you would. But it forced me to stop. And ultimately, it showed me, it's really simple actually. It showed me, you have limited energy, Kate. You wish you had boundless, but it's not. It's limited energy. So it serves for you to focus it carefully. What do you need to pay attention to? Where do you focus your energy? And, having been, all my life, look, very woolly, very lack of direction, not really focused, a bit sort of, oh, that would be a nice thing to do. Oh, I feel a bit nervous. Oh, no, I don't think I will. Very kind of floaty, woolly kind of person. I'm like a fucking Jack Russell at the moment. Post-menopause turned me into a Jack Russell about focus. Like, what is important? It's really, really important to me, first of all, that I am well. That's the most important thing. I spend a lot of time, I have people. I have a whole team of people. I go to classes. I do lots of yoga nidra. I have a personal yoga practice. I go and see my therapist. I go and get regular maintenance checkups of various kinds. It's really important that I eat really well as I possibly can, and forgive myself when I can't. And it's really important that I'm well, because I've got some shit to do before I cark it. And one of that is really important to me, that people know that it's okay to be vulnerable and that you have value. Your autumnal and wintry self has enormous value for the world. Perimenopause people and menopause people have enormous value for the world in and of itself. And then postmenopausal people also have enormous value for the world in a different way. And that it has purpose and meaning and value, this process of being worked by perimenopause. There's meaning in it. and that it's okay to feel wibbly, and that's it. It's kind of simple, really.
Well, it's simple to you, but it's not simple to, I think, the majority of people. It's got lost along the way. That simplicity has got lost.
Yeah, and it's
In all and
heartbreaking.
especially in all the medicalization and also that horrible word that you and I hate, the whole deficiency thing. So yes, you asked me this question at my book talk. So how do you feel, Kate, as a
What's this?
postmenopausal
Revenge questions, Rachel.
deficient woman? What do you have to say about that?
Yeah, I actually really taking it in. What happens is it kind of shuts my heart down. That's what happens. I have a sort of sinking, heavy kind of shut down, protective. I close off. That's what happens for me. So I close off and withdraw. So
I just want to punch somebody if they're going to to say that.
yeah, the anger will come later. And actually, just to say, we're talking what we're describing our habitual nervous system responses to authority and restriction. So you go in fighting, I shut down and withdraw. You're a fighter.
Well,
I'm a fleer.
I do that too. I do that too. Yeah. But no, I definitely do that.
So in the broader sense, for the deficiency narrative means that the world loses the skills, gifts, voices, and value of that entire population. That's what a deficiency narrative does. Because if you're told you're deficient, well, I can't do it. It's dangerous for me. It's dangerous for me to do it, and nobody wants it anyway. So we are effectively shut up, and the world loses. The world loses all that love, all that life experience, all that generosity of spirit, all that creativity, gone by using that one word.
Why do you feel it does that?
Can you ask that in a different way?
Why is it that if a woman is told she is deficient post-menopause, why does that then shut her down from being everything she needs to be?
Because it's too exhausting to fight, to stand up and be shot down. It's too exhausting to stand up and be humiliated or be shamed or be told, oh, you better be quiet, dear, and go and look after your grandchildren, or I think that if you've had 5 decades of experience of misogyny, if you add to that racism, if you add to that being neurodiverse and the abuse that collects, then postmenopause, why engage with that now? It's just too exhausting.
But if you can just take hormones and then you won't be deficient, doesn't that empower you to then go and be what you need to be?
Well, I mean, I understand why you're asking me that. And I think that for some people, sometimes, for some people, quite often, hormones will get them through. Will get them through a hard time when they couldn't actually function. I think that if the expectation is to return to how things used to be, if the expectation is that you can then return to giving to others more than you give to yourself, then it's just not going to work. It's not going to work. But I know that you're not talking about the personal, you're talking about the bigger picture, about using the narrative of using hormones in order to be fixed and be okay. And, it's just a lie.
Yeah.
It's just a lie.
I know we agree on that, but it's being positioned as a feminist narrative, isn't it? That it's feminist, that we understand the danger we are now in post-menopause, and we understand that we need the hormones, and we understand that we should demand the hormones, and that's supposedly a feminist stance because we're being empowered, whereas I personally believe that that is disempowering because it presupposes that we are deficient for the second half of our lives. And that doesn't make any sense. It just doesn't make any sense. How can we possibly be hormonally deficient for the second half of our lives? I mean, it's just, it's a lie.
I mean, maybe it depends on how you define feminism, right? I mean, that's another way of looking at it. So I would define feminism as the capacity, as honouring the cyclical nature in everybody. That's how I would define it, really. That we all have times of sensitivity and times of capacity, so sensitivity and capacity. And that we should be honouring that in everybody. The idea that taking hormones therefore fixes you so that you're able to give more means essentially implies that you're denying your vulnerability, that you're denying your own needs, that you're putting yourself, I love that phrase actually, it's so eloquent, putting yourself out. Yes, you are putting yourself out of whack. Some more. For how long? I mean, how long are you going to be fixed for before you go back into deficiency?
Well, forever, potentially. You've got to stay on it forever, otherwise you're going to go back to being deficient.
It's just such a misogynist, toxic narrative that dismisses women over 55 and other people who are postmenopause, non-binary people.
And that's what makes us angry, isn't it? That's where our anger comes in, because we're just like, that's not fair, and it's not just, and it's not true.
Yeah, and it leads to a lot of ill health as well.
Yeah.
I mean, we all know that in communities and countries where age is respected, people suffer less in menopause. And it's the same is true for health outcomes in older people. You know, if you feel that you're deficient and dismissed and you don't have a voice, then you ignore symptoms. You don't go to your doctor. You put up with stuff in a way that you wouldn't if you felt more entitled and had confidence and felt well and able to go and ask for what you needed. So it has a whole knock-on effect, you know, through all the conditions of older age, not postmenopause, older age, all the stuff that men get, that people of all genders get as we age. We become more vulnerable. We're more prone to heart conditions and, all the stuff, the other stuff that I can't remember today. Oh yes, dementia. that thing.
But changing the subject, one of the biggest indicators and changeable indicators of dementia in the future, in midlife, is hearing loss, is midlife hearing loss. So in fact, that's what we need to be talking about. And that's what we need to be focusing on, making sure that people can hear. And with all the loud noises going on, and we've talked about noise sensitivity, didn't we? And shutting things down. But being able to hear in midlife is an important component of not getting dementia in later life. It's fascinating, isn't it?
Yeah, really interesting. And that was the number one thing, wasn't it?
Yeah, nothing to do with hormones.
Yeah.
Anyway, as always, it's an absolute joy to talk to you, and we could talk forever and ever. I think.
I thought we were just getting started. Or you have to stop there?
Sadly, not. I've got to wind you in because I know that we could talk forever. But as we wind up, I would like you to tell everybody what you would most like us to take away from this conversation.
Yeah, I think I would love it if you took away that it's not your fault that you're suffering. I would love you to be able to drop shame and self-blame and a feeling that you did things wrong and that you can't get it right and you're not enough. That's what I would like. Because if you're in perimenopause, you're in an autumnal or a wintry state. And that's true also if you're feeling vulnerable and because you're you're changing work, or you're moving house, or you're at the end of a relationship, or you've lost a pet or something like that. These are all autumnal, wintry states where you're going to be feeling vulnerable. And that's not your fault. That's just part of being human, and you can care for that. You can step back a little from the world in some way that is doable today.
Thanks for listening to this episode of the Magnificent Midlife Podcast. If you enjoyed it, please subscribe, follow, and share it. Also, giving a 5-star review really helps get the word out. You'll find the show notes at magnificentmidlife.com. That's also where you can get my book, Magnificent Midlife, Transform Your Middle Years, Menopause and Beyond. Make the very best of your next chapter. Help me change the world, one magnificent midlife woman at a time.